15 Mysterious Secrets of the Conquest of America. The Conquest of America is one of the most impactful and transformative events in world history. While many believe they know this story well, there are lesser-known details that reveal surprising aspects of the process. In this video, we'll uncover 15 facts you probably didn't know about the Conquest of America. The first successful indigenous resistance. The fall of indigenous empires to European conquerors is often highlighted in history, but few are aware that there were several successful resistance movements. One notable example is the Mapuche resistance in southern Chile and Argentina, which held off the Spanish for over 300 years. The Mapuche managed to maintain their independence until the late 19th century, making their defiance one of the longest and most effective indigenous resistances in the Americas. In addition to the Mapuche, the indigenous peoples of the Amazon rainforest also mounted fierce resistance. Thanks to the dense and difficult terrain, largely unfamiliar to European colonizers, many native groups managed to remain beyond the control of both the Spanish and Portuguese for centuries. Even today, there are communities in the Amazon that remain uncontacted by the outside world, preserving their traditions and cultures in isolation. The conquest wasn't carried out by Spaniards and Portuguese alone. While Spain and Portugal were the main players in the colonization of the Americas, other European powers such as France, England, and the Netherlands also took part. In fact, English and Dutch pirates frequently attacked Spanish colonies, taking advantage of the empire's vulnerabilities. These incursions not only disrupted Spanish control, but also laid the groundwork for future colonial ambitions by other nations in the New World. In the Caribbean, for example, the island of Jamaica was seized by the English in 1655 after an invasion of what was then a Spanish colony. Similarly, the French established themselves in territories such as Haiti and Louisiana, while the Dutch settled in Suriname and New York, originally known as New Amsterdam. Each European power had its own interests in the Americas, leading to a series of conflicts and rivalries that spanned centuries and shaped the geopolitical landscape of the New World. There were black conquistadors. A little-known fact is that Africans also took part in the conquest of the Americas. One prominent figure was Juan Garrido, a freed African slave who arrived in the New World with the Spanish and fought alongside Hernán Cortés during the conquest of Mexico. He later participated in expeditions that explored parts of what is now the United States. Garrido is also credited with being the first person to plant wheat in the Americas, highlighting the diverse and often overlooked roles played by black conquistadors in shaping the continent's history. He wasn't the only one. Many people of African descent took part in expeditions such as that of Panfilo de Narvaez in Florida, as well as in the Viceroyalty of Peru. Not all of them arrived as slaves. Many came as soldiers and explorers seeking fortune and opportunity. African presence in the Americas dates back to the very beginning of the conquest and played a key role in the formation of colonial societies. Their contributions, though often overlooked, were essential in shaping the cultural, economic, and military foundations of the New World. Smallpox was deadlier than weapons. Although the Spanish had firearms and horses, their greatest ally was a disease, smallpox. This illness devastated indigenous populations, reducing their numbers by up to 90% in some regions. In many cases, the epidemics caused more deaths than the battles themselves. Indigenous peoples had no immunity to diseases brought by the Europeans, such as influenza, measles, and typhoid fever. Many communities were completely wiped out without the Spanish even needing to use force. This greatly accelerated European expansion, as entire cities were found virtually empty in the wake of the epidemics. Hernán Cortés burned his ships, but not for the reason you think. There's a popular myth that Cortés burned his ships to prevent his men from fleeing, forcing them to fight to the death. In reality, he sank them to keep the ships from falling into indigenous hands, and also because his expedition had no official authorization from Cuba. Cortés was a cunning strategist. He knew that his only chance of success depended on his men being fully committed to the conquest. By sinking the ships, he also sent a clear message to his indigenous allies. He had no intention of abandoning the expedition. This move strengthened the alliances that ultimately helped him defeat the Aztecs. The Vikings arrived before Columbus. Although it's traditionally said that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492, the Vikings had already reached North America around the year 1000. In Newfoundland, Canada, there is archaeological evidence of a Viking settlement at L'Anse aux Meadows. The Vikings called this land Vinland, and although they didn't manage to establish a permanent colony, their presence proves that Europeans had reached America long before Columbus. However, harsh weather conditions and conflicts with indigenous peoples prevented their exploration from having a lasting impact. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more history content. Your support helps us keep bringing you more fascinating stories. There were women conquistadors. Although history often focuses on men, some women also took part in the conquest. Inés Suárez, for example, was a Spanish woman who fought alongside Pedro de Valdivia during the conquest of Chile, actively participating in battles. Other women played key roles as cultural intermediaries, such as La Malinche in Mexico and Anacaona in the Caribbean. In many cases, these women influenced the fate of their people, either by assisting the conquistadors or by leading resistance against them. Not all indigenous peoples opposed the conquistadors. Many indigenous groups saw the conquistadors as an opportunity to free themselves from the rule of powerful empires. In Mexico, the Tlaxcaltecs were key allies of Cortés in his campaign against the Aztecs. In Peru, rival factions of the Inca Empire helped Pizarro defeat Atahualpa. This shows that the conquest was not simply Europeans versus indigenous peoples, it involved complex and strategic alliances. The first European city in the Americas was not founded by the Spanish. Before the arrival of the Spanish, the Vikings established a settlement in Newfoundland, Canada, around the year 1000. This site, known as L'Anse aux Meadows, is the earliest documented European presence in the Americas. Although it didn't develop into a lasting colony, it remains a powerful testament to the early exploration of the continent by Europeans. American gold and silver fueled the European economy. The enormous amounts of gold and silver extracted from the Americas transformed Europe's economy. Spain became one of the richest nations in the world thanks to mines like Potosi in Bolivia and Zacatecas in Mexico. However, the massive influx of precious metals also led to inflation and economic crises within the Spanish Empire. Indigenous languages influenced the Spanish language. Many Spanish words come from indigenous languages. Terms like chocolate, tomate, canoa, huracán, and jaguar have their roots in languages such as Nahuatl, Taino, and Quechua. This linguistic influence is a clear sign of how indigenous cultures left a lasting mark on the Spanish language. African slaves arrived before Columbus. Although African slavery is mainly associated with the colonial era, the first Africans arrived in the Americas before the arrival of Christopher Columbus. In 1501, the Portuguese brought the first African slaves to the Spanish colonies in the Caribbean. This marked the beginning of a transatlantic slave trade system that would last for centuries. The Aztec Empire lacked European technology. One common myth is that the Aztecs were inferior to the conquistadors due to their lack of advanced technology. In reality, the Aztecs had remarkable achievements in engineering, agriculture, architecture, and astronomy. For example, they developed chinampas, artificial islands used for farming, and had a highly sophisticated pictographic writing system. Their downfall was due more to political and military factors than to any technological disadvantage. Indigenous peoples used innovative warfare strategies. Although it's often believed that indigenous peoples lacked complex military strategies, many of them actually employed advanced tactics. The Maya, for example, used psychological warfare, such as launching poisoned arrows, while the Aztecs had a highly organized and disciplined army. Some tribes, like the Zapotecs, used ambushes and swift attacks to repel the conquistadors. Indigenous resistance continues to this day. The struggle for autonomy and indigenous rights remains a vital issue in the Americas today. Throughout history, many indigenous communities have resisted European domination, and movements still persist to protect their lands, culture, and rights. Today, the descendants of those who once resisted the conquest continue to fight to preserve their identity and their history across the continent. If you've made it this far, give us a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't miss more videos filled with surprising stories from the past that few people know about.